Broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can, if you're in front of your computer. This is show number 384. It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed Solaris's show, that's the show preceding this one, R.A. Costaldo, was the guest on her show just now, and they were talking about, their topic was magic, which is really, really cool. It's something we like. I hope you like it too. It only costs $5.95, Australian dollars that is, to access the Freedom Slips archives and check out her shows. Not just her shows, our shows too, and every other host on Revolution Radio. So you can get all of them. And then you can download it like an MP3 and you can listen to it in your own time, which is, I think, what we all do these days. You know, and I blame TiVo for starting us on this journey of streaming and choosing when to watch it. You might argue that that's not how it started, that it started because we had VCRs or VTRs, that's the first one. Massive tapes they were, where you could, watch a show, record a show and then watch it later on. Yeah, but, I watched one of my old VCRs, videotapes, and it was so grainy I could barely even make out anyone on it. Look, when I grew up, you couldn't even tell between the shadows on the screen. Like the shadow of the actual main character was shadowed, again, maybe even sometimes more than once. And you couldn't tell out who was the actual actors in it. It's very funny. It was such a bad picture, bad transmission and reception quality that you couldn't tell. And when the Channel 7 helicopter flew over the top of our house, it played with the effect. And, it was a multiplier for it. And it was, it's terrible. Anywho, Mecky and I, who's actually on the show, but he's just had to take a call today, right now. He's on a call. But he's on the show today. We, Becky and I, Shiny Side Out that is, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Darkinjung people, and where Mecky lives, it's the Guruk people. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. But let us also remember that beneath everything we've constructed, the roads, the buildings, and all the concrete in the houses, are lands which have had stories passed down for 240,000 generations. And look, that's a lot of generations. If you ask me, it is. It definitely is. And it's something that I'd like for people all around the world to connect to, because there was a pre-flood people. Pre-flood people is a civilization that lived as a global civilization before the flood that came and pretty much totaled it all. And you say, where are all those buildings and what do they do with it all? And, well, there's a few things. Most of the megalithic structures are still with us. Don't think that they were built before the flood. That's your mistake if you do that. There were lions in North America. There's megafauna. There was a whole bunch of stuff that was going on our planet at the time, which you have to search for to find. And you've probably heard about the Tennessee mounds, the giant mounds, the bodies that were found that were giants. We just did, I think, 14 shows on giants that we've just rolled out of that. And it's said that they are old enough to have been pre-flood. Of course, if you're a Bible advocate, they talk about giants in the Bible and the Nephilim. The Sumerians talk about the Anunnaki. Why is there a difference in your mind about those two? Why separate them? Why not simply acknowledge that it existed in the dark, distant past. In fact, it's actually not that far away from now. Really, it's like a blink in the Earth's time. Think about it. Why could you explain all of the Earth's megalithic stone building using exactly the same style of stonework? That doesn't seem to make sense. Okay, so I say you want to build a mud hut. Okay, let's choose, 5 civilizations from around the planet and get them to build a mud hut with no instructions. They're all going to look completely different. So why does the stonework look identical? And why have they chosen such an unusual way to build stone walls and megalithic structures with, 12-sided pieces that go around a bend? The same window style. Why? And don't say because it makes sense. It doesn't make sense. Today we would build it with completely uniform cut and sized stones, where we just ring up the quarry and say, I want 10,000, 1 yard by 1 yard by 2 yards long stones. Just deliver them up to the top of the hill here, that's where I am, and I will pay you when we receive them all. I don't know, he's making the bit up. However, they didn't. Every single stone was cut specifically only for that location, and there's no 2 stones alike. How could you possibly even consider doing that? And with the technology they had then, that would be almost impossible. Almost. Because they did do it. But who did it, and with which technology did they use? Or with what technology? That's the question that Mecca and I always pose, and that's why we're here to discover it. That's why we're here to learn it. That's why we don't quite understand what's truly going on. So anyway, this show cycle is the surface versus the below. And if you follow us, which I hope you do, particularly if you've just stumbled upon us for the first time, not despair. Don't despair. We have show notes and there's a website, and you can catch up and you can read them. And if you're really looking for a single place to start to understand what on earth's going around and what's going on this planet, that you've got the ability to find out for yourself. You can use our show notes as a starting point if you wish. If you wish. Not forcing you. Because some of our show arcs or show cycles can span, anywhere between 20 and 80 pages worth of collected information. And I think if I was going blind into it, at least I'd start there. Then we have links and pictures and all those things, but we can't do very much of that through the radio. But anyway, it's there if you need it. Simple as that. Pardon me. I coughed unprofessionally. Now, last week, we were talking about how humans anthropomorphize, which is giving the human scale and structure and in configuration also to ETs, and how that's a problem. The constant UFO sightings, and we've spoken about highly advanced tech effects. So we're seeing things in Skinwalker Ranch, and there's Bigfoot, etc. There's lots of different encounters, and there's also USO, so unidentified submerged objects. People are encountering those, and there's also disappearances in national parks, which don't tend to make much sense because the person was just on there's a clearing and there's some bushes. There's one example of the many examples, but you can read this in the book 411. We didn't write it. We're not. We're saying that that of all the information that was gleaned from the National Park Service, one park at a time, because they weren't allowed to do it nationally. They were able to aggregate this information and put it back out so that it's easily consumable. And one of those things which I thought was really important was that the one of the disappearances, as with many, were just some children playing, and they were playing hide and seek, and one hid behind a bush that was at the edge of a clearing and disappeared. And it was a major search, couldn't find anyone, and then the people that went up the path came back to find quite a confused missing person, no longer missing, who didn't understand where they'd been or what had happened, where they'd gone, where they hadn't gone, where they'd been, don't know, that just sort of appeared again. Imagine if someone threw the cloak of invisibility over you, but you ended up in a sort of like a cross dimension, a place that isn't quite here, and you're not visible here, but there's a bunch of other people on the other side. Does it make sense? And then, because it wouldn't quite look the same, then suddenly you reappear here again, and you don't know why no one could see you. They're the kinds of things that happen. Not saying that, they're all like that. I'm not saying that, people didn't, fall into a hole or decide to go caving for some reason and got lost and we'll find their body, decades from now. I'm not saying that they didn't fall down a ravine or just simply get lost and end up in the wrong place, or maybe they're torn apart by some kind of creature. Don't know. What we are saying is there are great numbers of people who have disappeared in national parks and never been found, or have been found and couldn't explain where they were or what happened to them. So we're talking about the mystery of those. So this is the highly advanced tech effects. Maybe there's technology involved in it. I think that has to be said. That's very important. What else did we talk about? Let's have a look. So we know there's been stories about the inner earth, societies and civilizations and cities. Admiral Byrd, for one, had some stories. Thanks, Amiga Logos, in the chat room, just saying hello. Thanks for the message about the audio being good. There we have mutilations, abductions, and seductions. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe they're checking on our genetic makeup. Maybe they're tampering with our genetic makeup. Maybe there's something to this. Wish I knew. Don't know, but wish I knew. Maybe there is a way of advancing us, or maybe they're just farming us for specific chemicals, like adrenaline, for instance. That's one story I've heard. I'm not saying it's what's happening, because I don't think anyone can categorically say that this is what's happening. But the question has been raised. Maybe it's that. And you're right, maybe it is. Yeah, that's okay, Meki, by the way. Just take it, you do what you need to do. Meki's still on another call, but it's fine. Okay, so the mutilations. Why were all the cattle found that I've read about found on their left side with no blood, no footsteps, no tracks leading to or from them, like they were placed there after being lifted from elsewhere and then placed in that location with circular or cylindrical, you could call it as well, cuts and pieces removed from the animals. And my first thought is it's got to be like there's some kind of cult out there doing this. But there's no tracks, no one was sighted near them, and in some cases they're either close to the farmhouse or it's a remote area. And why comes to mind? Why, who, when, where, and I don't know. Is there another one? those questions. How do you answer them? And why if they're in different parts of the world and there's exactly the same things going on, can we say it's a cult anymore? Why if there's no way of being able to find out how they got to where they got to, you can immediately start to dismiss, well, it's humans. Maybe it's something else. Don't know. It is not a flesh-eating disorder. So what's doing it? Some witnesses have said that they've seen their cattle disappear only to return somewhere else. So maybe this is what's going on. Maybe there is another dimension. Maybe their UFOs are sucking them up and doing their thing because they only need the lymph node, or they only need the whatever it is, or they're checking the... But it's fatal, this check. Like when your doctor says, oh, I need to check this, and you go, is it going to be fatal? Checking it? Well, yes. What's your point? Well, I would prefer I didn't die. Thanks very much. Can I have a second opinion? Oh, they'll want to do the check too. I just made that bit up. So, that's a real big concern. That if it isn't human activity causing this, then who is doing it? Now, this is where it starts to raise the questions, and we brought these questions, further still questions, we brought these questions up last week about that it may very well be that we're sharing this planet with another, maybe one or many different species of intelligence that we are unaware of because they choose to keep themselves hidden. I.e., you could live at the bottom of the ocean and withstand almost any onslaught on the surface of the planet, because nothing would make it down to you unless you were unfortunate enough to suffer a direct meteor impact. But if it was indirect in such a way that it was 100 miles away, then you'd have zero effects upon your existence and happily, like a bug protected behind your windscreen as you drove. It wouldn't have any of the wind or the rain or any of the other negative effects. So, also, living underground is also an option. You could live beneath the ice in Antarctica. You could live where we're not living. And would you consider that the surface of the Earth, as Meki put it last week, was just like the unwashed car? You don't really care what's on it. Doesn't matter. You're inside the car, and that's where your civilization is. So whether or not the Earth has hollows in which to live, whether they're natural or been, created, whether or not there exists a civilization in deep water, or maybe not so deep water, which we haven't entirely investigated, given that we really haven't looked into very much as far as discovering the sea floor. We know more about the moon than... It's an oldie but a goodie bit. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do than the bottom of the ocean. I mean, that being the case, think about what could be there. If we've populated so much, which is, it's 1/3 of the ocean, the planet's surface. If there was 1/3 of the bottom of the sea that was populated by another entity, then we probably haven't seen it yet. Not saying it's at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and I'm not saying that it's at the North Pole, or, maybe it's just in the middle of the Pacific. Maybe it's in the Southern Ocean, the least travelled ocean. Maybe that's where it is. Maybe there's an opening in the Southern Ocean to a world beneath Antarctica. That'd be a safe place. 2 miles of ice protecting you from anything above. And this topic, as above, as below. So if we look into space, it's teeming with life, apparently. Have they been here is the question. If it's teeming with life above us, maybe it's teeming with life beneath the surface of the ocean. Maybe the moon is still another hopping place. We don't know. That's why we're raising these questions, because these questions will go through the reasons why we're raising these questions during this show arc. So, do crop circles fall into the same category as mutilations, abductions, and seductions? Why would not non-terrestrial races give a thought to cows or crops, for that matter? Like, it would make sense if we were talking about a checkup or introduced species after a great catastrophe or thereabouts. Is one of our points that we've written down here. And because then that starts to make sense. And I made an example that, you don't go outside and start talking to the insects in your garden. We have a full understanding that they're not going to talk back. It's not reasonable. It's not reasonable to expect them to communicate with us, despite our best efforts. Because I remember as a kid, I'd sit down and I'd watch a line of ants, and they communicate chemically. They're not going to communicate with me in any other way. They're not going to say, "Oh, hey, thanks for the meeting. I'm really glad we talked about this. Your dog's been licking up some of our pals when they eat." That's not going to happen. So why would we expect that, say, an interplanetary or intergalactic or traveling species would want to talk to us? Surely, if we went into space and we were intergalactic, we could go from galaxy to galaxy, or we can just travel within the galaxy from solar system to solar system, which we can't do, right? In science fiction, sure we can, but we can't do it in reality. Would you? I believe you would set up rules, and everyone's talked about this, and it's well versed in sci-fi about first contact. What point at which a civilization is able to be contacted by an external party? So you're the external party, you're flying through space and you find some, I don't know, troglodytes, just making this up, or a species that hasn't yet got space travel. Are you allowed to observe them? Absolutely, probably. That would probably be allowed. But are you allowed to make contact? Are you allowed to present yourself to their person, right? Are you allowed to land on their White House lawn? Probably not. Probably not. Would you be able to talk to their military? I'd probably say that's probably a bad idea, because anything that they're going to want to know from us is going to be a technological advantage to them in a military sense. Because isn't that what, the storming of Area 51 is to unravel? Is it? That's what their whole goal is, to prove that they were reverse engineering alien craft? So why would it have been allowed to even occur? Unless, of course, the US military had designed a weapon or a way of being able to discover and shoot down any observers of our planet before our true space-faring ways came about. And maybe it's just as the late Stanton Friedman had said, that we were playing with matches, and that's what got their attention. Mickey, I'm just bringing it all together.
Beautiful.
So I've given a highlight of last week's show and raised the same questions that we raised, but pretty much in 30 minutes. And no compromising last week's integrity, of course, because the banter was great. Having said that, we're questioning whether this exists. The as above, as below, and where we go. So, Meki, I've taken us to the advantages of underground living, but before we go on,
good.
There is a lot of global news right now.
Yes, absolutely.
And I wanted just to cover off some of that. So you've been quiet for quite some time. I'm giving you the talking stick.
Okay,
you have the
no
mic.
worries. Look, I have to apologize. I actually had to do a little bit of work, so my apologies. But here I am. And look, global news have been really interesting. There's a lot of stuff happening, one of the most interesting things is the attack, or the so-called attack that Trump perpetrated upon these. I think they're called the Squad or something. The four congresswomen, only one of which was not born in the U.S. All the others are actually born in the U.S. So that was a bit of an interesting thing. But what we have to understand here, he's setting the scene for the election. There are two things happening here. So by polarizing, I guess the nation and his base, as well as this opposition, he can draw clear lines. It makes it easier to run a campaign because there's no ambiguity, right? And he's got a strong message that he wants to stick with, and that feeds right into it. They hate America. They should go back where they came from, and all that wonderful stuff. He's not stupid. This is rhetoric he's using deliberately. Secondly, what we can see, or what we will see, is a heating up of the Iranian situation over the next few months, with an action I think that would be taken around December, January timeframe. It's my guess.
Due to suit the election.
Correct. No sitting wartime president has ever lost an election.
That's right.
In the history of the United States, not one. So it's key to understand what's happening here. And it might be cynical, but it's realpolitik. It's what people do in reality in the political arena, and this is really important to understand. So my prediction is there will be an Iranian, unless some miracle happens, there will be an Iranian activity come December, which is sufficiently close to the election to be able to be dragged out. Right. I mean, once you start with air operations, sea operations, for a month or so. Followed by potentially land activities, which will drag out for many months, and that will be right throughout the election cycle, which I think in the States around the April timeframe, right? It's on May, April, something like that.
I only slightly disagree with the time frame that you're proposing, only because I believe that the dragging out part will drag out just as long as any other drag out part, and it's not an easily won decisive event, not
Correct.
A single event, and it could go on with larger gaps between, waiting for the presence of the other party. So my belief is that it might be sooner. That's the only thing that I'm going to say. I think it'll still be in full swing during the election cycle. That's my belief.
And look, that's my only stipulation is it has to be.
Yes.
It has to be still in full swing, right?
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that I would like to talk about, just very briefly, is obviously this is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing in 1969. I was born just right around this time as well, so just in case you're wondering. And I want to make a clarification here. Do I think that we have gone to the moon? Yes, I do.
Yes.
Do I think it is questionable whether we went to the moon in with Apollo 11, 1969? The answer is yes. I think it's questionable.
Questionable. Agree.
I'm not outright denying it, because that'd be foolish, because I have no proof and no certainty. What I do have is a healthy skepticism, and the reason I'm saying it is because the Apollo program had been such a disaster up until that point. Especially with the specter of Kennedy having promised the American people to get to the moon by the end of the decade, which was the decade of the 60s.
This was the last opportunity for them. That's
the
right.
Russians, the successes the Russians have been able to, tick off. First men in orbit. First this, first that. So there are a lot of things that the Russians did really well in the early space race, and the Americans were just lagging behind, so limping behind, in fact, right? Even with all the paperclip scientists coming through. So there was a lot of pressure on the, we're talking now July 1969. The next window would have been in the 70s. The next window for a manned moon mission would have been the 70s, because it takes forever to prepare for these things, right? Back in the day, anyway. Now we're a bit quicker, but back in the day, there's no way they would have hit the 60s with a moon landing. If that Apollo 11 had gone, really sideways.
Well, Apollo 13, which went pear-shaped on them, was April 11, 1970.
Yeah.
So that missed the window, right?
Correct. Exactly right. So let's be clear that it has been, fraught with danger. Mm-hmm. And, people make arguments about the Van Allen belt, this and that. For me, these are not convincing arguments, because it has been proven now, and I actually watched the scientific reports on it, that, they went through very specific parts of the Van Allen belt, and they only were there for a limited time. And the shielding that they had on the capsule and so forth is sufficient to protect yourself for a while. Did these people go in knowing full well what could happen? Yes. You have to remember, the mission before, Neil Armstrong's mission actually blew up on burned down on the pad.
Yep.
The astronauts were killed in the capsule. I don't know if you recall that, but in fact, quite a few astronauts were killed in this endeavor. So everybody knew the risk, and they're willing to take enormous risk. I mean, think about it. You're sitting on top of one of the largest explosive devices we have ever developed. Okay, that's who you are. You're that person that can sit on that and hope that it shoots you out of our gravity well into the moon. That's really what you're doing. So I think people that were involved in the Apollo program took a lot of risks, and I think they were calculated risks, but they were risks nonetheless. So to argue that they would be negligent with people's lives is actually a fact. They had to be, because you can't advance unless you do take some risks. Okay, because it's completely uncharted territory. So I don't believe any of those. I don't give much credence to arguments that say, they would never have risked people's lives. Absolutely, they would have risked people's lives. Absolutely. What they couldn't risk is embarrassment and failure. That's what they couldn't risk. Could they risk another astronauts dying? Absolutely. Absolutely, they could have risked it. I mean, since then, you look at the Challenger disaster. Sorry, the space shuttle disasters. Challenger being one of them. Absolutely, people will keep dying in space exploration, and they didn't shut it down after Challenger. They didn't shut the program down. Okay, it is not the deaths of the astronaut they were afraid of. It is the embarrassment and failure, especially in the light of the USSR's successes, that they were afraid of. So, if I had been them, and if I had Stanley Kubrick on my side, who, by the way, produced a Space Odyssey 2001, and if you look at the footage in that's actually pretty good, considering, right? Yeah, sorry, Apollo 8, Dave, you're right, Apollo 8 burned on the pad. But yeah, so they were the first ones meant to be on the moon, in fact, Apollo 8. But the point is that if I was in that position, I would I would have staged it, because you can never know what's going to happen, right? Or I would have at least been ready to stage it, right? So were we successful? Maybe we were successful, right? Were we prepared to go ahead and risk astronauts' lives? Absolutely we were. But we could not risk a failure. So in my mind, to err on the side of caution, I think it would have been a safer bet to stage the entire thing. You still shoot the astronauts into orbit. I mean, that's. I mean, we all know that happened, and we all know they came back. They re-entered, right? The contention is around whether or not they actually landed on the moon at that particular time. Okay.
Because Apollo 9 orbited the Earth in low orbit. Apollo 10 went around the moon, but was a simulated, undocking
Correct.
and docking, and then returned back to Earth. And Apollo 11 was to land. However, in light of you're right, in light of missing the deadline and doing it safely, that the filming of it occurring and then bringing the astronauts back in one piece was the big risk, and they could not lose that.
It was critical. No, they had to have success. If they failed afterwards, it didn't matter, but we had a successful moon landing. Beautiful. In the 60s, like Kennedy promised. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand the entire spectrum of the argument here. Can I prove any of this? I cannot prove any of it. No, I can't. but I'm a highly skeptical individual, and I understand human motivations. And to me, it is clear that the risk of failure was too great, and the negative feedback of failure would have been too great. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's really
Kubrick has after he died, there was a video of him stating, which wasn't a deep fake, by the way. He stated in a video that was to be released after he died, so that he was no longer at risk, that he actually filmed it. He took part in the filming of it in a soundstage.
Correct. Now, again, is that proof positive? No, it's not. But I mean, there are enough indicators, enough doubt in my mind to question it. Okay, and that's all I'm doing here. Have we gone to the moon since? Yeah, sure. In fact, I believe that we went to the moon much earlier than that. In fact, today's show is going to talk about some of the things we believe could have happened as far as a theory is concerned. I think the moon has been visited for a long, long time now, and I also contend that the moon is an artificial structure, a built structure. You say, "Oh, that's crazy, Mackie. That's insane." Well, not really. And it's not insane because we have become very good at doing things, and we're getting better and better every year at doing things. And if you look at the scale of things that we've built here on Earth, the pyramids, other things as well. I mean, we have done things like this, right? We've done things that are amazing. And the more our technological prowess grows, the more our engineering skills grow, the bigger the things that we built will grow. It's just a natural thing. And once we're out into space in orbital factories, or even in factories that are beyond Earth's orbit, right? Maybe amongst the asteroids or whatever, we will see constructions which will be gigantic. And we might even become I think it's a stage 2 civilization where we start building a Dyson sphere. I mean, these are all things that are theoretically possible, right? And like I said, one of the lead scientists I spoke to recently in Australia, we're just, chatting. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, he said, watch out, a few years from now, I think he said, I can't remember, it's 5 or 10 years, I forget now, and we'll have a space elevator. And I go, really? And then we started talking about the technical aspects of it. We need material that doesn't collapse on its own weight. We need to anchor it. Obviously, we use one of the Lagrange points. How would you get up there? You could use, I guess, a rail gun kind of elevator system. Look, but the point is that the key thing here is the material. What material would we use to build that thing? And he goes, no, we're there. We're there. We can. So that's awesome to see, right? And after that, a lot of things become easier because once you have a space elevator, you no longer have that massive cost of shooting or blowing someone up into orbit. That's because that's all you're doing. You're just blowing someone up into orbit because it's so hard to escape our gravity well, right? And the space elevator minimizes that cost significantly once it's built. Yeah, sorry, Dave. That's what I had on that. One other thing I wanted to quickly mention is the health crisis that we're facing in Africa, which is now a global or international health crisis, and that's the Ebola outbreak, which has now killed, I think, 1,600 people, and has, like I said, been declared an international health crisis. That's not good. This has been going for close to a year now, this outbreak, and the thing is, it is now that we see more and more infections coming through. So more infections have happened in the last few months than in the 8 months leading up to this time, right? So it seems to be accelerating, is what I'm saying. That's the worry. So that's not a good thing. And one more thing, Dave. I don't know if you've seen this. Up in the Alps, above I think 4,000 meters, they found a freshwater lake.
Yep.
So this is above the tree line, and at that altitude, you should not be able to see any liquid water. You should not be able to. This is the first time ever that anyone has seen a lake at that altitude in the Alps, because it should all be frozen. This should be all frozen ice. There should be no water pooling, and there's a little lake that obviously formed in recent melting events, and that's unheard of, completely unheard of.
Yeah, that's true. I want to tell you that the earthquake events around the Southern California are still occurring, and the split is there and is visible from space, and that there's more activity now in all the volcanoes is they're all like waking up, and there's quakes even in Mount St. Helens, by the way. But it's not the only one. There's like a dozen volcanoes that are, showing activity, not showing volcanism. But there was also some hot spots that caught fire next to the volcanoes. And that's really important. So if you were to look at the life of a volcano and the proof or readings or telemetry you might get from a volcano to say whether it's waking up or not, and these are some of the signs. Not saying they're going to erupt, just saying, watching them carefully. It's like if someone's going to wake up, they might move their head or a couple of limbs first before their eyes will blink open. That's important, right? If you were trying to observe it. I'm only talking about observations. And despite that, we're seeing, the Ring of Fire is lit up now with the most amount of greater than 7 that we've experienced in recorded history. And it's all condensed into the last month. This year has seen some amazing volcanism, or earthquakes or tectonic plate activity, seismic activity, but it's in a scale now which is just really hard to fathom. It's so much higher and greater, and it's located in regions that we thought were asleep. So what is this? And I keep raising the questions, and I will do every time someone talks to me about it, and that is this just a natural effect of going through a very heavy location on our galactic plane of gravitational waves? Is that what's caused? Is it only gravitational waves that we're experiencing and causing this seismic activity? Or one of the other questions that have come up in the past is the Earth's core expanding? Is that a thing? Is there geologic activity occurring on other planets in the same solar system? Is it something the sun is doing? It's a huge gravitational importance to the Earth. Maybe it's doing something. It's burbling or something like that. We don't know. And we're not at a point where we can know, but we're getting closer. I think that's really important. It's not like we're living on the flanks of Mount Vesuvius and wondering whether it's going to kill us all or not, right? Oh, just go about your business, doesn't matter. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, what the Earth does rumble and it does move, and it's made of plates that are clearly moving against each other. No argument from me. But is this right now it's a heightened time? And what does that really mean? That's the question we're putting out there. I don't want to turn into a philosophical conversation about, the existential existence of humans, right? And how bleak it is. I'm just saying, well, we should not ignore it. We shouldn't ignore it. We should read it and understand what it means the best we can, because we'll learn more that way. The Trump thing, Meki, and the Iran thing was the only other 2 topics that I had. My friend is in Greece. They were on the ferry when the earthquake occurred, but when they got off, everyone was talking about this earthquake, and they're going, "What quake?" That was pretty. That was pretty, right? Yeah. But see, we're seeing them everywhere now.
Go ahead. Oh yeah, absolutely. There seems to be an increase in areas that previously hadn't seen that much tectonic activity, right? Mm-hmm. It's interesting. And what's also interesting is, and this is a warning to everybody, please don't go ahead and storm Area 51. That's a bad idea. So you have to understand that there are areas in the world that are military zoned areas, okay? And that means live fire will be used to protect those areas. Because, let me put it very simply. If I have a military base, and this is where I do some of my R&D, for the Navy, mm-hmm. for the Air Force, doesn't really matter, but that's where my laboratories are, that's where my stuff is. And then it's like, 10,000, 100,000 people are marching on my base. I don't know who's in that group. I don't know who these people are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are they all conspiracy theorists wanting to see aliens? They just I don't know that. There could be terrorists in there. There could be saboteurs in there. There could be all kinds of things in that group that just come in with, if there were a storming of
tourists,
the Groom Lake
terrorists,
well,
hippies,
but that's the problem,
abductees.
Right?
We don't know, right?
So don't be part of it, because if I was in charge of the base and I had people coming at me and I was part of the military and I had my standing orders, fire would be opened.
A-10s,
because that's what happens. Sorry?
Warthogs, A-10s, Bert.
Yeah, that's right. No, but it's a thing, right? So please don't. It's actually completely nonsensical, right? What we have to do is we have to go through the proper channels, because you will never be able to do this by force. Trust me, anything that you could possibly see on the surface is not there. There'll be nothing on the surface. There'll be nothing in the hangars.
That's right.
It'll be all underground. It'll be all would have been carted away a long time ago. Okay, so it is silly. It's just a stunt. And in fact, the guy who started this on Facebook says it was just a bit of a joke. So
that's right.
Because it's so please don't. Please, we don't need that. It'll be America's Tiananmen Square if that happened.
And you know what? 2 million, I think, have signed up now. And that's bigger than the people who conducted the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Don't.
And to me,
don't. Well,
go on.
Really? Do you want to risk your life to do it? I think it's... look, if I was living in the States and... I'd want to know, but is it worth your life to know? It isn't. It just isn't. And Meki's right. They're going to protect their military assets, and they don't know who you are. So if they use... Do you know, Meki, on the other hand, right, how would the press handle this if it did occur and there were thousands of people killed? Or hundreds of thousands, or 1 million people killed.
Yeah, completely.
Right? How would the American military be able to withstand that kind of coup? It's almost a coup.
Yeah.
It's a people's coup, right? How would they be able to come back from that? Well, that would be, like the New World Order thing, right? Let's accelerate the New World Order. Good luck with that. They're all bad.
Yeah.
Is that the only thing that would be the headline? But they were all bad.
Yep.
I'm sure there'll be some guy tapping the sign saying, using lethal force. Don't make me tap the sign again, right? Don't cross the line. It's like the southern border. It's like the Mexico border. Who's going to clear away all the dead bodies when they're allowed to use lethal force to stop people crossing without a passport? Even before an asylum seeker, seeking asylum is not illegal. Even before they've proved that they were attempting to seek asylum, they're killed, right? So I put it into the same bucket. I shouldn't, because they're different things entirely. But wow! Don't joyride on this expecting to find something. I think that's the take home.
No, it's completely nonsensical. Don't. In fact, listen to today's show in the second hour and around what we think about where we actually are. I mean, from last week's carryover. I don't know if Dave has expanded, but I believe, and now Dave also believes because he's here with me on the mic, that the Earth's surface might very well be a third world type of nation in comparison to the inner Earth or undersea civilizations that are quite likely inhabiting our planet with us. So we are. Let me give you a simple example here. This might illustrate it. We've still got a few minutes. We today have various different levels of advancement or civilization on the planet. So we've got high-tech societies like America, Australia, Singapore, China, those places where we are living a very comfortable, a very privileged life, a lot of technology and a lot of know-how and fairly easy lives. At the same time, At the same time, we have got civilizations on this planet which are living in near Stone Age conditions, right? And not completely, obviously, but a lot more primitively and a lot poorer and a lot more in need of help, if you will, where people don't even have clean water. I mean, if you live in America, for the most part, in Europe, in I guess in Australia as well, clean water for you is not even a thought. You don't even, it's just a thing that you have. You turn on the tap, there it is. You have to understand that the vast majority of the planet's population doesn't have that luxury, right? That's the music.
Yeah.
Okay, come back after the break and donate if you can.
Can. You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5.95 per month. I'd like to say hello to all of the new listeners we have out there, and we're glad you're on board. So whether you follow, subscribe, like, whatever, all of those other positive things you do with us and our feeds or streams or news or website or whatever have you, thank you, and we wish you an easy and safe journey through this. We're halfway through show number 384. Meki will say 480 and 300. It's just the way he does it. And that's very interesting. So I'm going to start reading the first part of the story. This is The Advantages of Underground Living by Isaac Asimov. That's June 2nd, 1989. The thought of living underground, of burrowing in the earth like moles, of separating oneself from the air and sky may seem unpalatable, but if we stop to think of it, there can be many advantages to living underground. First, weather would no longer be important, since it is primarily a phenomenon of the atmosphere. Rain, snow, sleet, fog would not trouble the underground world. Even temperature variations are limited to the open surface, and would not exist underground. You know, we wouldn't be seeing the 50-degree Celsius temperatures we're seeing, or the, minus 23 Celsius, or what have you on the Earth's surface. We'd be controlled by the tectonic plate magma-driven heat and the insulation that it provides from above and below. Whether day or night, summer or winter, subtropical or subpolar, temperatures underground would be in the neighbourhood of 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The vast amounts of energy now expended in warming our surface surroundings, whether they are too cold or cooling them when they're too warm, could be saved. The damage done by weather to humanity and its structures would be gone. Even earthquakes would only be 1/5 as damaging beneath the surface. Second, local time would no longer be important. The passage of a day and night coming at different times in different places can be avoided. Underground, where there is no externally produced day, the alternation of work, play and sleep can be adjusted to suit ourselves. The whole world could be one 8-hour shift, for instance, starting and ending on the same stroke of time everywhere, at least as far as business and community endeavours are concerned. That would also be television programming, for instance. Could all be exactly the same across the entire planet. This could be important in a freely mobile world. Air transportation over long distances, east and west, would no longer entail jet lag. If we leave New York at noon and take 12 hours to get to Tokyo, it will be midnight there. The same midnight, and midnight for our own biological clock too. The third, the ecological balance of the Earth would be better off. Think about it. To a certain extent, that is, humankind encumbers the earth. It is not only our enormous numbers that take up room, but it is also the structures we build to house ourselves and our machines to make possible our transportation, communication, and recreation. All these things disturb the wild, depriving many species of plants and animals of their natural habitat, and sometimes, as a side consequence, favouring a few others, such as rats and roaches, and bin chickens here in Sydney, which are the ibis bird. The more of ourselves and our works we place underground below the realm of burrowing life, the more room there will be on the planet for other forms of life. Fourth, nature would be closer. It might seem that to withdraw underground is to withdraw from the natural world, but would that be so? Would the withdrawal be so much more complete than it is now, when so many people work in cities and buildings that are often windowless and artificially air-conditioned? Is it such a large gap? Even when there are windows, what does the eye behold in some places but other buildings? One might argue that there is a physiological difference. However, divorced present-day cities may be from nature. We are in view of the sun and the sky by looking out the window or stepping out the door. Isn't that right? That's all we are. But look at it this way. To get away from the city now, to reach real tracts of greenery and of reasonably unspoiled nature, a New Yorker, a Londoner, a Tokyoite must travel horizontally for miles and hours through heavy traffic, first across city pavements and then across suburban sprawls. If we were living beneath, if we had an underworld culture, the countryside would be right there, a few hundred yards above the upper level of our cities. Wherever you are within them, the world of nature would be an elevator ride away. And the dwellers beneath would see more greenery under ecologically healthier conditions than dwellers of surface cities do today. And remember, as one more point, that in our underground world of perpetually equable weather, walking would be much more pleasant. There would be less reason to use transportation facilities for short hauls, thus conserving further energy and increasing bodily fitness. Meki.
Look, I think this is a very good point. Obviously, this is as Dave said, an essay that was written by Isaac Asimov, and we all know he's quite a thinker. But I wanted this here, Dave, because I wanted to highlight that underground living would not be such a chore. It would not be such a terrible thing. There's a lot of advantages to it. If you look at this and extrapolate it onto a civilization, this would be a civilization that experiences a lot less disruptions. So weather is no longer an issue. Earthquakes are much less. So all the natural catastrophes, well, most of them, would no longer be an issue. There's no flooding or tsunamis to worry about, right? Droughts, not really a thing, because you would be using the Earth's aquifers and have massive underground storage systems of water. So overall, being on the surface, to me, speaks to a fairly primitive lifestyle, right? If you lived underground, your civilization would be allowed to grow much faster and much more comprehensively than it could above ground, right? It's a fascinating thing once you start thinking about it. And we have had so many stories, Dave, and we've spoken about this over the last 8 years, and certainly last week again, of inner Earth civilization, of civilizations that are meant to exist at the bottom of the ocean, things like that. They exist in every bit of folklore that you find on the planet. Every ethnic group, every civilization, every tribal organization has a story of underground or inner Earth dwellers. Sometimes they're dwarfs, but not always. And it's really amazing stuff. It's astounding when you come across it. So, is it that far-fetched? I want to say no. Which brings us to the next bit here, which is the Hollow Earth theory, from ancient civilizations to modern researchers and explorers. And while we have spent a lot of time on the Hollow Earth in previous show cycles, it behooves us to just look at a few examples here to once again drive home the point of the feasibility, right, of this particular theory. And this is an article from 2017. If you could choose to explore the furthest reaches of outer space or the deepest depths of the Earth, which would you choose? But before you answer this, consider. Some believe there's much more to the inner Earth than rock and molten lava. Actually, it's magma. If it's in the Earth, it's magma. When it hits the surface, it's lava. So, anyway, supporters of Hollow Earth theory, also known as the inner Earth theory, posit traveling to the depths of the Earth would lead to other environments, and perhaps even human beings residing there. Right? I mean, we have had some stories. This is from Admiral Byrd and his famous polar flights. You know, where he very well might have crossed over into an inner Earth kind of scenario. But we're not saying the Earth is hollow here, Dave. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is there may very well be massive underground caverns, underground hollows, if you will, where civilizations could exist. Doesn't mean the entire Earth has to be hollow, right? It just means there are massive caverns which could house millions or potentially even billions of people. Because we have them on the surface, there's no reason why we couldn't have them underground. And underground, you don't have to worry about the oceans. So if you really look at it, mathematically speaking, the further you go down, like if you go down a few kilometers, you have a lot more potential surface area than you would have on the on the surface of the Earth, right? And you could have in several layers. You just go down a level, and all of a sudden you've just doubled your living space. Go down another level, you've doubled your living space again. Okay, now and take a look at the many groups of people who believe in or research Hollow Earth, and decide for yourself what the Earth's interior may have to offer. This is really what this article is here. Just give us a bit of a refresher. Now, what does this theory say anyway? Again, we're not subscribing to the Hollow Earth per se, but certainly to large cavities. In a nutshell, the idea for Hollow Earth posits that planet Earth is either wholly hollow or otherwise contains a substantial interior space. And like I just pointed out, like massive cave systems, for example. Beliefs about the specifics of the inner Earth, right? They vary, but generally evolve or revolve around underground civilizations, technological and spiritual advancements, and alternative and even paradise-like environments. Again, if you don't have to worry about the weather, oh, nice! And as Dave pointed out last week, if the Earth wasn't tilted at 23 degrees, we would have the same weather all year round at the whatever point of the globe you are. So if you're on the equator, you're experiencing exactly that. The equator shows you what would happen to the rest of the world if it wasn't tilted. Now, of course, it would get colder the further north or south you go, but it would be the same temperature and the same kind of weather all year around. Inside the Earth, even more so. Okay? So supporters of this theory claim evidence to support this particular theory has been stifled by scientific communities such as NASA. Let's look at some of the ancient beliefs of the inner Earth. And this is from North American First Nations people. The Makuxi claim that a vast network of tunnels connects our world to mysterious chambers located under the surface. This indigenous group, residing in the Amazonian countries of Brazil, Guyana, and Venezuela, have legends in their oral tradition that speak of an entrance to the Earth. They mention entering a cavern and traveling 13 to 15 days until they reach the Earth's interior, which is said to be where the giants live. Makuxi legends name the giants as the protectors of the inner Earth. again, it's nice. One show just flows into the next, isn't it? Hopi, the Hopi, alongside the Makuxi, the Hopi Indians also profess they emerged from an underground shelter after the flood destroyed the Third World. They believe their ancestors derived from that underground environment. Again, it's nice how all the shows, Dave, flow into each other.
True.
In the Hopi culture, they specifically reference emerging from the Grand Canyon and also mention mysterious ant-like gods and flying shields. But is there proof about the Hollow Earth? Now, so hard physical proof, I personally have not come across, but there are some indicators I'd like to share with you. Explorations by various individuals throughout history brought about discoveries that could support the inner Earth theory. Admiral Richard E. Byrd of the United States Navy flew to the North Pole in 1926, as well as the South Pole in 1929. He referenced the North Pole as the center of the great unknown and also wrote of his excursions in his diary. In his descriptions, he references allegedly entering the hollow interior of the Earth, which included mountains, lakes, and rivers, as well as animals and vegetation. He also reports finding cities, civilization, and emissaries of the inner Earth civilization called Agartha. More research about this excursion mentioned that Byrd found Neuschwabenland, which featured underground caverns flowing with warm water and signs of vegetation, but neither he nor his crew could stay long to explore due to the aircraft bombardment, they say. Now, Neuschwabenland is actually a section of the Antarctic that was named so by German explorers. So that's actually a piece of land on the surface in the Antarctic. So whether or not something is underground there, I do not know. Some people profess there is. Again, there's no hard evidence for any of this. Okay, it's funny though that Admiral Byrd was hospitalized after returning from Operation High Jump down in the Antarctic in Argentina. He was incommunicado for a while, and he was hospitalized in a mental hospital. So, you know, that's a really interesting bit of the story there for Operation High Jump, because a lot of people contend that Operation High Jump went to the Antarctic to root out any Nazi underground camps or fortresses that might have existed at the time. A show on this, look it up on the net, or come to the archives here on revolution.radio. Again, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence here. Other individuals, though, are also said to have explored these openings to the inner Earth, including William Reed, who wrote Phantom of the Poles in 1906. He supported the Hollow Earth theory, but without sun or interior shells. Again, he was more a proponent of the large cavernous sites within the Earth. More recently, in 2005, Stephen Curry planned an expedition to go to the North Pole to explore a possible opening into the inner Earth. Well, I don't know. That expedition hasn't happened. I'm hearing that there's an expedition underway, Dave. But I don't know. To the South Pole, correct, not the North Pole. I don't know where we're at with it. Yeah. Yeah. That's the flat earthers. Sorry, getting my Earth theories mixed up here. But it'd be interesting to go to the poles and test these theories, especially up on the North Pole, right? Because there's actually mental mass up on the North Pole to the South Pole. The North Pole is really just a ocean area for the most part. There are also alien theorists here. Researcher David Wilcock stated in interviews there is an alliance of ancient civilizations living inside the planet, which is in fact very close to what I believe. He believes these beings inhabit the inside of the Earth for long periods of time, made possible by hollow cavities on the surface of the crust, which include their very own biome, replete with bacteria capable of producing its own natural light. We know about bioluminosity. We know that any ecosystem can thrive. There are ecosystems that can thrive pretty much anywhere. So we found the extremophiles at the bottom of the ocean, near the volcanic vents. In fact, it teems with life there. And if we ever attempted to go to that depth, we would be crushed in less than a heartbeat because of the pressure would just be too our bodies. Wilcock goes on to claim living in these cavities allows for civilizations inside of the Earth to monitor what is happening on the surface of the planet or the outer Earth. Wilcock specifically mentions the Atlanteans as one group that went underground to survive the chaos occurring on the outside of the planet. Our theories here, mine and Dave's and Wilcock's overlap. It's not entirely exactly the same, but certainly there is overlap. And it's interesting to see how different researchers come to very similar conclusions. Now you could say false conclusions, and that's okay. You know, there's no harm in arguing. I just find it hard to believe that this would not be a thing. A telepathic communicator. Well, even Hollow Earth theory is indeed a theory, Diane Robbins believes that she has inner Earth proof. Her telepathic interactions with her living in the underground civilization of Agartha, which she describes as a network of about 120 subterranean cities. And in my mind, that kind of scenario is probably a lot more likely than a whole hollow Earth. It just, in my mind, it seems more feasible. In an interview with Vice, Robbins describes how both the inner Earth environment and her interactions with those who live inside the Earth. Robbins says the center of the Earth is a central sun held in place by gravity, and there's much more land than ocean in Hollow Earth. She claims the individuals are physical humans like we are, but live in peace, isolation, and seclusion, and through this they have gained their immortality. Her message from the inner Earth's inhabitants? Just call for peace for the planet, because we can only evolve from peace. Can't really argue with that. Archaeologists. What's happening with those people? In modern-day Germany, thousands of underground tunnels dating to the Stone Age have been studied by researchers, including German archaeologist Dr. Heinrich Kusch. They stretch throughout Europe from Scotland to Turkey and do not all link up. Excuse me. Kusch claims these ancient highways have been found under dozens of Neolithic settlements across Europe. Dave?
Oh, absolutely. One thing I just wanted to point out was Ab Bird's statement where he says, and I'm trying to find the actual quote, but it appears as though you could just consider it, bearing in mind that all of this occurred, and it's the search for craft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds, a year after the war ended with Germany. His quote right before he went, he was determined to be clinically unwell. That's the only way I could put it. It may very well have simply been a normal reaction to seeing something that was way beyond us. I just want to put that out there, because that's the question we're raising. And if they didn't want him to talk anymore, the easiest way is silence. Right? There you go. If this now back into the archaeologists, if you have that level of technology, you can fold space together so you can jump from one point to another like warp drive, then it is pretty feasible. You could easily have an underground or underwater base. It seems there are a lot of underwater bases where UFOs turn into USOs and hang out. It just makes sense. I've seen a UFO turn into a USO. I didn't see it after it was USO, but I saw it plop into the ocean. And that's why I think it raises more questions than it delivers answers. 70%, as I said at the big top of the show, of the Earth is covered in water. And most importantly, there is no humans underneath that water, unless it's only for a temporary measure. Unless occasionally they go to investigate a shipwreck, or maybe they're just doing maintenance, as one of my friends did for a career for 30 years, on oil rigs and their drilling platforms. So that's 70%. That's the most of the planet where you can put a base and no one is going to mess with it. No one is going to drop a nuclear missile on your base when it's underwater. From an outsider's point of view, underwater is an ideal place to put a base on this planet that's filled with the insane humans on the surface. I like this person's writing. The logical place to do is to put the base under the water where they won't mess with it or find it or discover it. Then you don't have to put signs up like, you'll be shot on sight for coming into the alien base. You just stick the base way underwater and then you're good. Nothing to worry about. I mean, you could also place it in the Antarctic continent. We really didn't do much with it, right? And now you can't go there. You need a passport and you're escorted and there's limitations. And it may stand that is, in fact, indeed where there is one. Admiral Byrd talked about there being craft that rose out of the ocean and high jump. And there was a battle. So who were they? I wonder. That's the question's always raised. Because it makes total sense. Why would MH370 fly down to the Southern Ocean? Maybe it was stuck, following on from our George Simpson interview, stuck to the side of an even larger UFO, where it plopped into the ocean, never to be seen again. So, they're great questions. I love questions. Secret UFO underwater bases. UFO sightings are also very frequent by the water today. Now, while there is not as many options to have secretive bases on land, that didn't stop any country in the world from making secret bases, did it? What is very conducive to a secret base if you have advanced technology is having it underwater. While your secret base might stand out a bit on land, where it's obviously the main of it underground, still you'll have some kind of entry or a building, there is a ton of real estate to have a secret base underwater. Now, in order to fold, this is like a repeat, in order to fold space, you need to go out of sync with time and gravity. Now that way your spaceship can then move about freely. You don't even have to worry about gravity because it's meant to be encapsulated within the field that you've done. That's why it's been described that by being able to fold space and time, and you can move from one point to another, you're not effectively moving. You don't actually move. You pull the destination to you and then let go of where you are. And now you appear to zip or dart across the sky to the new location. But since you didn't move, there's no inertia, there's no momentum. You're not affected by acceleration nor deceleration. And to you, the universe isn't extraordinary. Mekki, do you want to take underwater bases off the coast of Malibu?
I'll take of course Malibu 450, John. And this is really the next section here is around the USO activity, right? So we understand that civilizations may have existed or still exist underground, and we have some traditions and legends around that. But there's also, as I said, a lot of activity in our oceans. So California has been a UFO hotspot for years. And when it was theorized that a structure discovered 600 meters or 2,000 feet below the water, 10 kilometers, which is about 6 miles off the coast of Malibu, was in fact an alien base, it didn't come as that much of a surprise. The structure has a distinct oval shape and what appears to be a flat top. I don't know if you remember this, guys. It measures approximately 5 kilometers, which is about 3 miles. Wide, and there also seem to be pillars holding up the main roof of this mysterious anomaly.
I don't know if you remember these pictures.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. These pillars look to be spaced evenly apart, almost if they were an entrance of sorts. The alleged alien base was first brought into the public arena when Jimmy Church, who hosts the radio show Fade to Black, acted upon information given to him by a listener who went by the name of Maxwell. Maxwell gave coordinates from Google about something he believed may be an artificial structure. Church, with his design team, obtained as many different angles of the structure as they could. Church stated that after investigating all of these angles, he very much believes this structure is indeed artificial, even going as far to say it could be the holy grail for ufologists. Of course, not everyone subscribes to this theory. Earthquake geologist David Schwartz, for example, states the alien base is most likely nothing more than part of the continental shelf, further stating that he didn't see anything special in the pictures. Ben Hansen, a former FBI expert in pictures and video, also warned that people should be cautious how to interpret Google Earth images, stating they are pieced together from different sources and can often be misleading. Look, these are fair points, Dave. These are fair points. Underwater base off Puffin Islands, Wales. Numerous sightings of strange lights leaving and entering the sea around Puffin Island, Wales, has led some ufologists to believe that the area may be home to an underwater alien base. A spate of sightings in early 1974 were particularly interesting to investigators. All spoke of not just lights, but solid objects seen leaving the sea near the island. UFO investigator Phil Hoyle stated that he had read various unconnected reports concerning Puffin Island, and that all of them tell the same story and describe the same type of phenomenon. He also stated that alleged alien abductees, close to the area have reported that the abductors were humanoid and told them they came under the sea near the island. There are even some theories that the area may be the ancient legendary kingdom of Contra Arguelot. I'm sure that I butchered that. And that these humanoids are their descendants. Hoyle believes that the ties to an ancient site and the current UFO activity shouldn't be downplayed, stating that according to his research, there's an 80% increase in such activity on or around ancient sites worldwide, which, just very quickly before I throw it to you, sir, this is really the point here as well. These ancient sites obviously are ancient and therefore have been around for a long time, which means that they would have interacted with any other civilizations that we cohabit this planet at the present time. So, these might even be places that they built for themselves, or places they built to interact with us, right? I mean, if you look at structures like Baalbek, I always come back to Baalbek because it's such an anomalous kind of place. A 1,000-ton megalith. You just don't see them every day, everywhere. In fact, you don't see them anywhere except for there. This is the only place on the planet where you find 1,000-ton stone pieces. Like one big megalith, one big piece of stone weighing 1,000 tons. Tell me about Lake Ontario, Dave.
Yeah, no dramas. So there's it's said that there's a UFO base under Lake Ontario. In December 2013, MUFON published a report from a Hamilton resident who claimed to have seen several strange glowing orbs hanging over Lake Ontario. He also claimed to have seen these orbs on the lake several times prior, and what's more, he believes that there is an alien base under the water. He is far from the first person to have made such an assertion. In August of 1981, 5 witnesses who were driving alongside Lake Ontario early one evening saw a dome-shaped craft flying over the water. They followed the craft for some time before seeing it begin to descend and enter the water, just like I did. Disappearing, but mine wasn't Lake Ontario, disappearing from their sight. Perhaps the stories of an underwater alien base stem from the 1977 book, The Great Lakes Triangle by Jay Gourley, who made note that many planes and people had disappeared over Lake Ontario, not to mention the many UFO sightings in the area. Another book, Underground Alien Bases, released in 2012, and written by the somewhat strange Commander X, has also perpetuated the legend of the alien base under the lake. It features within its pages several accounts of sightings on and around the lake, and the assertion that an alien fortress of one kind or another lies under the water. However, none of the accounts can be verified by a secondary source, and so are left open to debate as to how reliable they are. You know what? Just go to Lake Ontario and have a look to see if there is something. Maybe they just go under there and hide, like Marco Polo. Maybe they're doing that with us. Who knows? They're playing Marco Polo. Flight corridor. Here's a flight corridor to underwater base. North Island, New Zealand. And I just want to say, if you haven't seen that footage of the plane flight, seeing the orb between Australia and New Zealand on a cargo flight, I think it was, they filmed it out the window. North Island in New Zealand has been witness to many strange objects entering the sea, with activity stretching out to some of the offshore islands around the area. UFO researchers state that the area is a hotspot for such activity, with locals claiming that the area is a flight corridor to an underwater base for the strange craft that exists there. Between January and March in 1995, there were dozens of sightings of these objects coming and going in the area. These were not limited to nighttime, with many of the objects being witnessed during daylight hours, because that can exclude stars and other excuses that people put there, like, migrating geese and in temperature inversions and swamp gas. One particular... Swamp gas! Just look into this little thing here. Poof! One particular daylight sighting on March 9th, 1995 stands out. It began with two fishermen, not a single sighting, but two fishermen who witnessed a bright silver ball-shaped craft that seemed to glow or pulse as it moved and emitted a strange red stream behind it. The two men saw the object for less than 10 seconds before it vanished from their sight. Around 2 minutes later, however, there were sightings of what seemed to be the same object by the control tower at both Hamilton International and Rotorua airports. I've been there. Further supporting the incident were several reports that were phoned in to a local radio station from concerned residents, who all described a very similar object in the bright, sunny sky. My goodness. This is corroborating evidence. So this is, if you're a policeman investigating this, they saw something, the control tower saw it, the fishermen saw it, they saw something. You can't say it doesn't exist. The question is, what was it and who was piloting it? And did it move in a... And, because it was a meteor, Mickey. Right? That's all it was.
That's it. Interesting.
Done. We can wash our hands of that one now. We can move on.
Yeah.
We named it something. Yep.
Yeah, it's Bob. Oh, it was Bob. Let's not talk about Bob. Okay?
Not again.
No, but you're right. Once we've named something, I don't care what it is. Be it the placebo effect or similar. And once you've given it a name, you no longer have to worry about it. It's what is it? Oh, it's a placebo effect. Okay, thanks a lot for that. So what?
Even
what
the double slit experiment doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even make sense. But there it is.
Doesn't make sense. But you're right. Hey, presto! There it is. It's complete nonsense, but it's part of our reality. And I still haven't figured out why the quantum effects fade away when you get systems that get bigger and bigger. I wonder what washes it out. I wonder if gravity washes it out. I think gravity is at the heart of this.
Message, Mickey? What message would you send to the stars? Right? Would it be, just being silly here? Would you draw a single slit with a single slit behind it, and the double slit with the pattern, the interference pattern? Would that be enough? They go, oh, they found that. We found that, years ago. But that's awesome, isn't it? They send like a smiley face emoji.
Yeah, I think that would be enough. I think that would be sufficient, to be honest with you, because that's one of the fundamental mysteries. Hopefully for everybody. If it's just us, we like the slow kid in class. Yeah, back of the bus for you. Back of the bus for you. Come on, what you doing, hey?
Yeah, their children solve that at age 2. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Go to the principal office. You're too stupid to be here.
It's still on their fridge at home. Yeah.
The next bit is actually really interesting. And I'm sure you remember this, all of you, everybody out there. This is the Pacific Ocean humming. In the case of the alleged underwater alien base in the depth of the Pacific Ocean, the mainstream scientific explanation is actually stranger than that of the ufologists. It really is. According to a research team led by Simon Bauman-Pickering, and how could you be wrong with a name like that, the low humming sound that has had people searching for bases installations for over 2 decades is nothing. It's nothing more than sea creatures releasing gases from their swim bladders.
Sure it is.
Essentially breaking wind. UFO researchers have almost entirely rejected this assertion. This is the one time when maybe the UFO researchers seem to be the more coherent of the mob. The humming has been studied and debated since 1991 by scientists and UFO investigators alike, when it was first observed by National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Ufologists argue that rather than being a sound of the natural world, the sounds are more akin to those of electrically powered artificial structures. To them, this is proof of the existence of top-secret underwater bases, which are quite probably extraterrestrial. I will say here no, not necessarily, given the advanced technology that would be required to build and operate such an underwater building. So, now the other theories, of course... Exactly. That's exactly right. And the humming could be generated by marine vessels,
military,
or
craft.
Could be an unknown. Yeah, could be an unknown geological phenomena. I mean, there's a variety of things that could be. I'm not disputing that, of course. But my point is that the whole idea of this show cycle is about talking to the theory that we are co-inhabiting this planet with other civilizations, and again, of humanoid or even Homo sapiens origin, if you will, or our makers, maybe the races that came before us. I don't know, but I contend that we're not alone on this planet. In fact, never were. We have never been alone. Mm-hmm. And you know why? Because of all the stories that we have. You could argue, yes, sure, some of those stories are just, came out of the fevered imagination of people huddling around a fire. But other stories are repeated all around the world. We have this kernel of commonality, which makes it hard to put into different kind of threat responses, if you will, right? I mean, if you all have the same kind of threat response, but we're not all living in the same kind of environment. We don't all share the same kind of predators. As human beings.
You're right. So, Meki, if 200 people from different cultures all around the world were put into a single place and watched a car go by, but we didn't see it, and all we had was their anecdotal description of what occurred, there'd be the kernel of truth in the middle, and then some things around the outside which would be different from each of their viewpoints.
Yeah.
That's just the way that happens, right? So it's the kernel of truth part that I'm, from an investigative point of view, that is the most important component of the story. None of them said a plane. They all said a car, not knowing what a car was, but they described it in a sufficient way to understand what it was. This is what we're saying. Don't throw them out because they're not expert witnesses or trained observers, and they're not military, or just because it's not sufficient for you to have their story in there because it maybe topples the balance. None of those are important. What's important is that kernel.
Yeah. 100%. That's exactly right. And it's really the commonality yet again, right, of all those stories. The kernel is the inner truth, the soul of the story, if you want to be short.
Nice.
And it's astounding how similar the the themes are and the experiences, right? But also it's interesting how different they are. While dragons exist in most folklores, the view of dragons in the East is very different to the view of dragons in the West. Why? That's a very good question, right? It's maybe the East had really good experiences with dragons back in the day, and then the Western civilization, or the Western world, the Western countries had really bad and negative experiences with dragons. If dragons are in fact a real thing.
Yeah. But they had dragons.
But they had dragons. That's right.
That's
the thing, right? They had dragons. Dragons are a feature across cultures, across vast swathes of time and geography. They're all a thing. The flying serpents of the South Americas, right? Mm-hmm. It's it's a thing. It really is. The depiction of dragons also is quite similar all over the world, which it shouldn't be, because it could be any old thing. But no, it's always like a snake-like appearance.
That's
with
right.
legs, but always a snake-like appearance. So look. And again, over the last 8 years, we've gone across a lot of these similarities, overlaps, cultural similarities that go very deep indeed. So there's some really good books around that, right? I mean, I can only recommend you start reading them yourself. There's I forget now the title of. There's I've got a whole bunch of books here on my shelf. I will make you a list for next time. So because I neglected to do it today, but there certainly is an astounding array of evidence, and it's mostly dismissed because guess what? It's just fairy tales and legends and myths, Dave. That's which brings us to the strange lights in Puerto Rico, I guess.
Yeah, so let's just attach the word myth to it. I can't stand the word myth.
I know.
It's the bugbear. It's the monkey on my back, right? Don't call it a myth unless you've investigated it. Because the slightest investigation can't be ignored. It's just a thing, right? Don't call it a myth because that's instantly dismissing it. That's in my view. Strange lights and sounds in Puerto Rico. The island of Puerto Rico, which I actually saw. I watched a documentary on Puerto Rico today. Had numerous accounts, not the documentary, but the island of Puerto Rico, PR, if you want to call it that, has had numerous accounts of UFO sightings, particularly along its northeastern coastline. I wonder why. Where strange craft have been seen both emerging out of and disappearing into the water for years. There is also a strong US Navy presence on the island itself, and stories from locals and US expats alike state that the US military, at the very least, is monitoring the strange activity on the waters along the coast. Experienced ufologist and researcher Nick Redfern recently told of an ex-civil defense employee who had witnessed a strange craft emerge from the waters of the Puerto Rican coast. It steadily rose up into the air before shooting off at speed. Another account came to Redfern from a local police officer, remember this is a trained observer, who stated that the US Navy had spent considerable time tracking an underwater craft along the northeastern coast of the island. There have been numerous claims and theories that the immediate coastline of this Caribbean, as we say Caribbean, not Caribbean, island is home to underwater alien bases, perhaps none more specific than those of investigative journalist George Martin. Martin stated that using NOAA satellite images, they found several anomalies. Wow, I put my teeth back in. Anomalies around the island, which suggested artificial. Okay, don't hurt yourself. Artificial structures. Martin stated that these structures were unusually large and precisely rectangular, and were generally on the eastern and southern coast of the island. He also claimed that coming off many of these structures there appeared to be what looked like tunnels leading to other structures and even to the mainland. What is interesting is that the PR city of Ponce, during the late 1980s, local residents were complaining to authorities that they could hear a loud rumbling, to which seemed to be coming from beneath the ground. That's the same kind of sound and rumbling you get when there's machinery underground drilling, like making tunnels. It was reported that the sounds were similar to those you might expect to hear when heavy machinery is operated. The sounds seemed to stop after several days. One of the places on the mainland that Martin's tunnels appeared to connect to was the city of Ponce. Meki.
Sorry, I was muted there. That's fascinating stuff, isn't it? I mean, anyway, let's keep going here. Ancient alien bases at the Lake of Titicaca. Now, that's one of my favorite places in the world because it's such a strange place. So Lake Titicaca is way above the tree line, right? And there's a city there as well, and there's actually a harbor in that lake.
It's the highest saltwater lake on the planet.
It is. It makes no sense. It's one of those. It's like Pumapunku. And Baalbek, for that matter. It's a completely incongruous place. And the predominantly still waters of Lake Titicaca on the borders of Peru and Bolivia are not only the world's highest navigable waters, but also host to a plethora of UFO activity. And according to some, home to an advanced and possibly ancient alien base. Again, use alien here interchangeable with inner Earth civilization.
Other terrestrial, not extraterrestrial.
Yeah. Correct. The ancient city of Tiwanaku, considered to be one of the oldest cities in the world, right after Göbekli Tepe. Yeah, I had to put that in there.
That, Brian Forster.
It sits on the southeastern shore. Yeah, that's right, of Lake Titicaca.
Brian Forster is a friend of the show, by the way. I'm not having you go at him.
Oh no, of course. Oh, absolutely.
Goes without saying.
And credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
Ufologists, ancient astronaut theorists in particular, state that the advanced level of agriculture, irrigation, and astronomy, as well structures that suggest advanced building techniques, leads them to believe that an extraterrestrial race once resided here. Again, see, look, I have no issue with coming to the conclusion, but I believe that's the easy way out. I think it is intellectual laziness to some extent to think it all has to be explained by extraterrestrials. I believe that the human race and our predecessors, for that matter, reached very high levels of civilization well before us. Much higher, in fact, I think, than we have reached at this point. But we're subsequently struck down by either a catastrophe that was natural or designed to come about and wipe them out. So we don't always have to think of this as extraterrestrial phenomena. And again, I will say it one more time, the anthropomorphical problem persists. Okay, why do all of these extraterrestrials look like humanoids? They should not look like humanoids. Even if they look like octopuses, I'd still be skeptical. If they look like anything I could recognize, I would be super skeptical about their origin. Anyway, okay. Resided here. Numerous texts and statues have also been found in the immediate vicinity of the lake, which seem to depict ancient Mesopotamian underwater gods. Gods that they claim were from an alien civilization that once resided under the still waters of Lake Titicaca. Recently, a video surfaced on YouTube shot by a group of Italians who were on a spiritual journey of sorts in the region. As they pointed the camera out to the still blue waters of Lake Titicaca, what appeared to be a large submerged object was seen slowly making its way away from the shore. It appeared to be disc-shaped, and as it moved through the water, its shape remained the same, suggesting that it is indeed solid. If there was an ancient alien underwater base below the surface of Lake Titicaca, perhaps this video may suggest that it's still very much in use today.
That's so true. Let's have... I don't think we make it 3 minutes. Okay. Underwater alien base at Guantanamo Bay. According to a former US Marine who served at Guantanamo Bay in the late 1960s, there is an underwater alien base off the Cuban coast. Furthermore, the Marine claimed that of the many UFO sightings of strange objects going in and out of the water, the US military has even managed to capture several on film. He also states that he and his colleagues were under strict instructions not to talk about the strange activity they witnessed there. I think he blew that. The Marine claimed that the craft he witnessed appeared to be made of a dull metal with a series of blue lights, probably along its side or something. When they would enter the water, the blue lights could still be witnessed, but would grow fainter and fainter, suggesting to him that whatever the object was, it was descending deeper into the water. Perhaps coincidentally, around 140 kilometers or 90 miles north of the US base in Gulf Breeze, Florida, there have been several UFO sightings that seem to match the descriptions of the craft as described by the unnamed Marine, and may suggest they are originating from the same place. By the way, Gulf Breeze, Florida is not a mecca, but it has a number, like a significant amount of sightings there of UFOs on or hovering above the water. One particular sighting came in November 1987 when Ed Walters claimed that he witnessed a strange object flying overhead from the coast. It emitted a bright blue light that trapped him in its beam. Then, he said, he stated that while he was caught in it, everything around him was blue, and he could not move. Walters did manage to take several pictures of the craft. Hundreds of witnesses came forward to say they too had seen the strange object that evening. There is debate over the credibility of this account. MUFON seemed to believe this sighting was genuine, while others have stated that the photographs were obvious fakes. In a strange twist, years after Walters' claims, an investigation into his story was said to have discovered a model craft very similar to the object that Walters stated he had photographed in a house where he once resided. Supporters of this claim, or his claims, however, argue that this model is an obvious plan to discredit him. I remember seeing that story unfold as it unfolded, and that the most important, the takeaway message from this was that maybe he made the model after it occurred to try and replicate it. Like I've done a very similar thing to attempt to recreate the thing that I saw. But in balance, who knows? And we raised the question. Meki, there's the music.
Good night, all.
Good night,
awesome.
All. Yeah, be awesome to one another. And stay tuned for Jer Bear's Roundtable. Enjoy that, become part, dial in and discuss. Take care, everyone. See you next week.